Howdy all and welcome to Rauta's AMA, that is Ask Me Anything. You people have been a wonderful audience and you have been asking me interesting questions quite recently actually, so there has been a couple of these AMA videos in a short span of time and you still have questions that I yet have and haven't answered and will not be answering with this video, but rest assured they will be out rather soon. I haven't really planned these answers so much, so they're rather more or less improvised. So let's do it on the fly, so to speak. Here you have 11 questions, which I hope you to see there right on the video screen. So I try to go them in orderly fashion. Question number 1: thoughts on the modern day black metal or metal scene? Do you feel like it's dying or doing well? Or would you rather see this metal scene or the one that when black metal was new and scary? Well, I think the black metal scene is doing actually quite nicely. There are lots of cool bands. It seems that more and more cool bands are emerging in a quite quick pace. Obviously, most of the older bands are still there, so it's not like the older ones are going away, even though a lot of new bands are coming. So I think it's very healthy and vital for most parts. And as such, I think it's doing well in general, despite which country we're talking about or which style we are talking about. And to the question whether I would have this one or what it was, I would say obviously this one, because I think that even though back in the days it was kind of scary and it was new, it was more underground and all that stuff, I think it would be kind of going back to nostalgia, to the kind of style that when old people are like, everything used to be better when I was young. Things were not that actually better. First of all, nowadays we get to see a lot more bands playing live, old and new. I mean, bigger bands, from the scene are more available there. Obviously, the ticket prices have, gone through the roof in so many ways. But at least you have the possibility to see both the old bands. I'm talking about like the first wave of bands like Venom and stuff. And also kind of, the classic second wave bands, be it about, Satyricon, Dimmu Borgir, Emperor, whatever. And also the nowadays bands. So it's very vital in the scene to have all these different eras represented so well. You can actually see Mortis playing old school set and all that stuff. So I think it's very, very nice phase which we are living through, and it is very important for especially the younger audience who just missed the stuff back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, I missed the stuff in the 80s. It's not like Bathory did gigs, but so many other bands which are not there anymore. Maybe not so much in black metal, but other styles anyway. So I am really happy where we are nowadays, and I don't think the scariness has gone anywhere. I mean, it's different nowadays, obviously with so many different subgenres, but in general I think black metal is doing very, very fine, and so many other bands and people, artists that is, are inspired to do more stuff. Also we have quite healthy scene, and also that is like how black metal and metal in general has also gone to YouTube and all that stuff. I mean, you wouldn't have imagined channels such as mine like 10, 15 years ago, obviously. So I think in general it is now possible to see more gigs, more interviews, and more special things versus back in the days. So I'm happy to live in this age, and I think many people are happy to share that time as well. Second question is best metal bands out there at the moment. Now this is kind of a hard and tricky question, because obviously it's like how we define what is best band. If it's in my opinion or somebody else's opinion or in general audience, well, it would depend totally on the person answering the question. In my opinion, it varies, from time to time, because obviously some of my favorite bands are not at their best shape anymore. Like for example, I'm a long-time Slayer fan, but I don't think a Slayer is anymore what it used to be. Same could be said about Wasp, and even more so. I mean, Wasp was so great and should be great still, but it's not like it was in the 80s or 90s. So I had to kind of exclude them, even though I love those bands. One of the bands which I really like this still today and have liked it for a long time is Enslaved. I think they're doing just great, because many of their latest albums are among my favorite Enslaved ones. So I would say, yeah, they are one of the best bands still out there. I kind of want to say Paradise Lost because they are also very vital and they have a long discography and still doing well. And I'm a long time fan of that also. But unfortunately, one of my favorite bands, like, or many of my favorite bands, especially in black metal era, it seems like they are kind of gone. I mean, I'm talking about both live and gig wise. So, for example, I would once again among Slayer and the Wasp, I would like to say Dark Throne, but I really can't because it's not the band so much what it used to be. So, bands out there at the moment are very different from what it used to be. Now I'm getting kind of distracted. So I guess I would have to say bands like Enslaved and Paradise Lost, which are still very much today what they are, or what they used to be, even though they have gotten better. Of smaller bands, I guess I would have to say Satanic Warmaster is still among my favorite bands, because I mean they're one of the best black metal bands of all time. I like the music, I like how they go live and all that stuff. But then I really had to kind of start thinking which bands I would mention because, so many bands are just gone or change style too much. So maybe those three would be some of the few best possible bands I would imagine right now out of the bat. Probably forgetting some important names, but hey, that's how it is. Which country produces the best black metal, best metal music in your opinion? Well, this obviously depends on genre once again, because different cultures, different places, different locations have different kind of people, of which then results in different kind of metal music. For example, when it comes to black metal, I would have to kind of, to be talking about the local scene, that is Finnish scene, because Finnish scene has a lot of really good black metal bands. So I would guess in black metal bands nowadays, I would have to say black metal. It used to be Norway back in the 90s, but it has shifted. When it comes to thrash metal, I think very much 80s or kind of a hard rock, glam metal kind of stuff. Once again, when it comes to death metal, I'm more divided between United States and United Kingdom because obviously bands like Ball Thrower, Morbid Angel, Death, various countries. Also, Sweden was very, very strong with their death metal back in the days, especially. So it depends. It cannot say which country produces the best metal, like if it was just one country, because obviously it depends so much on the style. If we are talking about thrash metal, then I would have to lean, okay, back in the USA. So it depends. Heavy metal is also quite varied from country to country. Where we're talking about heavy metal bands such as Manowar or I don't know Wasp, Iron Maiden. I don't know. It depends so many ways. So it's not like one country that produces the best, but it's more about bands. So cannot really say like that. I kind of would like to say yeah, it's United States, but it's not because of various styles. Finland, Great Britain, United States, Sweden. I guess those would be my top choices of my favorite bands. Favorite video game of all time? That would be World of Warcraft. Now, not only because it was great game design and open world, I'm a big fan of open world games, but because also we had this really great group of people, and unfortunately some of them are not among us anymore, so rest in peace those who have died. I knew a few people, I can at least remember two people quite close to me in the game, and one of them was really close in real life as well, who have died. Actually, I know 3 World of War people who have died. A couple of went through their own hands. One just had a kind of a surgical accident, if you will. But it was all about people, not only game mechanics. Well, one could say 50-50 basically. It was, of course, fun play to game, not just a online community, but that meant a lot. Played that about 6 years. So it's a long time to make friends. Hey, I even dated a girl through that. Metal girl, by the way. So had a really good time with that. But if I would go beyond World of Warcraft and talk about my favorite games in general, which would include past few years, I would say GTA 5, that is Grand Theft Auto. Really like Rockstar style, what they have with characters, game design, open world content, humor, commentary on society and all that stuff. And especially fun gameplay in general, you can do just so many things, cause chaos and havoc and destruction. with also, you know, enjoying good plot lines and characters. And also Red Dead Redemption 2 a couple of years ago. That is one of my favorites, kind of a tear-shedding game in so many ways because of this really touching, moving story with so many memorable characters. One of my favorites, definitely. I'm not even a big Western fan. I mean, I do like some good Western movies, and I like the setting and kind of a Wild West theme, because I mean, it was kind of a this unconquered land in so many ways, and there was like outlaws and whatnot. So it's kind of like another medieval time in so many ways, but with fire guns, firearms and whatnot. But I think Rockstar really nailed it once again with kind of a similar yet different style with GTA 5. So those three would be probably my all-time favorites, and that would also include the past few years. Now, Witcher 3 is still in the making in my gaming world, so it might be there like in top 4, top 3, but I haven't played it yet. Only a couple of hours, so really can't include it just yet. Question number 5. What do you do for a living aside from doing YouTube? Well, first of all, I'm not doing YouTube for a living. It's only pennies what I basically have here every now and then. We're talking about very little money. And even that is kind of divided between me, the camera crew, and editor, which are more or less the same person. But we are like 3 people who get their share of the money here. So we're not even covering our travel expenses, really. It's getting better with Patreon, thanks to you, to your supporters. It means that we can actually go outside Finland at some point when we're just gathering enough money for that and paying those plane tickets. But we're not really making money out of it, so cannot say I'm doing this for a living. This is just merely a hobby. Hobby that pays a little pennies and gets me a lot of CDs and vinyls, obviously, but not living beside, you know, it. What I do for a living is I do PR and communications. That is, I do press releases, I do translations, I do update social media pages, I attend to events, organize them in some ways. So I work at a PR agency. Nothing to do with music as such, but let's say that my work actually helps to deal with PR agencies in music, and helps me to understand how review process also works on the other side of the table. So it's very different. Question number 6. Do I have a family, kids, wife? Yes, I do. 1 kid, 1 wife. At least for the moment. 7. Name a band you would like to interview but haven't gotten a chance to do so. Well, Burzum and Dogthrone. Those would be my top 2 choices, really. Burzum, well, obviously, reason being a fan of the band, and Vari Vikernes as being the very important and interesting person. Also Dogthrone because one of my favorite bands. Hey, come on, I have this Nocturno Culto shirt here. And, well, very interesting bands in my opinion, and very meaningful. Metallica would be one of those bands because I grew up with Metallica. I think I have mentioned it before. It's one of the most influential bands, so I would want to include it. And with that, I guess Iron Maiden would be also a thing to do. Those would be, I guess, top 4. There are bands obviously beyond that which are very, very interesting in personal and otherwise, but maybe those 4 would be covering a lot for Rauta and personal interests. What are some metal bands you feel underrated? Well, this is once again a topic which I have already discussed previously quite a few times. It is totally subjective which bands are underrated, which ones are overrated. I always like to say all the bands you like but nobody else likes are underrated because you feel like nobody knows how good these bands are, why aren't they listening to that? And all those bands are overrated which others like and you personally don't. Like I could say Five Finger Death Punch is way overrated. I mean it's shit, but people just go crazy about it. When it comes to underrated, why don't people like Ildiarn? Why they don't like Von? Why don't they like Nehima from France or stuff like that? Because they don't know about those bands, and that's where I come to help. I want to, bring those bands to you also, be it classics or new bands, because you don't just know them yet. You are not aware how good bands they are. So those could be seen as underrated bands. I'm not saying like bands like Slayer or Enslaved are underrated because, well, they are quite big anyway, but still people should be listening more Slayer, Wasp, and stuff like that. Question number 9. Also, which country do you feel have the best bands outside Europe and North America? Now, this is a interesting question because, like I said, most of my favorite bands come either from Europe, be it United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and then obviously North America being Canadian bands, Quebec scene especially for black metal, and United States for especially thrash metal and so many death metal bands, even some black metal bands like Abzu. But what about the other bands? What about Asian bands or Middle East bands or Australian bands or South American bands or Antarctic bands? I don't think there are any Antarctic bands, by the way. If there are, please let me know. It would be fun to find out about those. Or African bands. Now, I haven't really heard many African bands, and to be honest, the ones I have, not very interesting. Most Middle Eastern bands, same goes for that. What about Australian bands? Well, Destroyer 666 is one of my favorites. Not anymore Australian, but I guess it counts because they started in Australia. Nowadays, being relocated in Europe, but I still think they are Aussies at heart. So that would be Australia in general. Actually, has quite a few good bands. Obviously, South American scene has very important scene. Has a load of bands which are more or less important. Not so much personal liking, but still, they have had meaningful, impact. So which countries? Well, Brazil, I guess, has to be mentioned along Australia. Japan, because Japan has also interesting selection of bands. Not of my favorite exactly, but I think they have some meaningful bands. So to say which has the best bands, that would be a tricky question. I guess I would be inclined to say Australia. That is outside Europe and North America. Question number 10. Your thoughts about Latin American scene and favorite bands from this side of the world. This side of the world. Probably the person making the question is from that part of the world. Now, I guess my favorite bands, there are scarce and few. I've enjoyed Sarcophago. I've enjoyed some of the other smaller bands from there, like Evil from Brazil. But I guess Sepultura, because back in the early 90s, it made a big impact on me. And hence I featured Arise as a classic album not too long time ago. I would say my favorite bands probably must have been Sepultura. Not so much with Roots and so much afterwards, even though the late album Quattro is pretty good. But because if you know albums like Beneath Remains, Arise, even Chaos AD, Schizophrenia to some extent, that kind of made impact on Small Cherry, So guess that would have been my favorite, but I don't really have other favorites. Even bands like, Sex Trash and whatnot, they're more like, yeah, cool that they did what they did, but it's not like among my favorites. And same goes with, Sarcophago. Meaningful band, important band, but not really my favorite. But I think what I like about Latin American scene is that it kind of shows the Latin passion, the kind of the heat, what is so often said. And I think as such, it's very important, to have that kind of a passion, which I think Europeans and North Americans especially are kind of lacking. And Japanese are way too kind of a cool and cold in a way. They don't have the Latin passion, It doesn't matter if you go to Mexico. Mexico, by the way, has one of my favorite bands, Xibalba. Or Xibalba, I don't know, actually sure about the pronunciation. Anyway, the Latin American people, like Latin people in general, have the kind of a strong passion and the kind of the fire. So there's something really important in that scene. And last but not least, 11. What martial arts do you do and what belt/grade are you? I'm guessing jiu-jitsu, judo. I don't know why powerlifting seems to go with throwing people about. Actually, yeah, I have some background with Brazilian jiu-jitsu and some with submission grappling. I tried to make it short. I started in 2000. It was August maybe with Kung Fu, Charlie Foot Kung Fu for about 4 years. It was more about kicking using some traditional Chinese weaponry, spears, swords, whatnot. Kind of a traditional style, not so much. We had some full contact combat, but I mean, big boxing gloves and all that stuff, kind of a Chinese boxing in a ways. But I mean, it was more traditional, having a variety of different weaponry, and doing these kind of a long series of movements. I don't even actually remember nowadays what it is called. It's not kata as it is with karate, but it's different word. It just doesn't come into my mind. After about a little bit 4 years and then some, I changed to a relative kung fu style called Tang Lang, which is the praying mantis style. Kind of this kind of stuff. It was more street style. We had shoes with the kick because it was street style. You don't go out, go out in the streets with barefooted. You have shoes, so you can kick in different styles. Using kind of a palm of the foot when you kick, like in the nuts, and without being afraid to hurt your own feet. And also it was very, very more aggressive style, kind of like what modern mixed martial arts is. You had these kind of MMA gloves, not big boxing gloves, and it was really kind of aggressive style. This kind of straight into go punching. No high kicks, because then you're in danger of getting down and all that stuff. But I mean, very, very nice style. I did about 4 years. Then I had some personal shifts in my life, like relationship going shit and all that stuff, and I kind of needed a break from martial arts after about 8 years or so. That's when I, by the way, started going to the gym. I was already quite old in the age of 2008, being almost 33 back then. And I also did a lot of jogging, so I had a little bit of a pause there. But I just couldn't live with, going to the gym. I needed something else, or, jogging. I was very, very active all the time, but I mean, I didn't have any martial arts time. Then I went to a Brazilian jitsu class with my friend, which I did about a year, a little less, maybe, I don't know, 11 months. I'm not exactly sure, but roughly about that time. I got my first grade there. About talking about Kung Fu's, I had a few grades with either of those, or both of those styles. So, yeah. And with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I kind of liked it, but when my friend left it, and I kind of wanted to get back on my feet to have punching and kicking versus grappling. I mean, I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is one of the best martial arts styles, because you learn so much about your body. It's very all-around, it's very heavy, it's sport-like. You give everything you have in order to defeat your opponent, and it's very tactical. So really, really, really enjoyable and really hard on your body. You had your body aching so much more than on those classic style when you're on your feet. Maybe not getting so many bruises because of not having kicks or punches, but still, I mean, overall, I think it was more demanding on your body. Obviously, I was getting older, so that affected too as well. And I had my share of karate when I was like 16, but that was only a few months, so I didn't usually count it like, yeah, I started back in 1991 or so, which I think I did karate for like 1991, but it took me like 9 years to get back into the martial arts after that long, long break. And then I started Defendo, which is more like really based self-defense. Some say it's not that reality based, and I think I'm kind of inclined to agree nowadays, because I have gone beyond that style. But it was more about defending against attacks on the street or by the door or whatever, and also full contact, low kicks mainly, but more about punches or taking people down, and maybe using handcuffs if you had. So it was more about getting control and protecting yourself versus being a competitive sport. But even I wanted to go even further, and that's when I found out about Shenshido, which is more about open concept, not so much a school of techniques when it comes to punching and escaping battles. That is self-defense situations and threats in general. And that was even beyond what Defendo was teaching, even more kind of a hardcore in reality-based self-defense. And with Defendo, there were some grades, but not in a classic way. And with Shenshido, there were no grades at all, because they didn't kind of make any sense. You either learn or you don't, and you are about bound to learn when you just do that. Grades are meaningless. even the name of a style is meaningless. You just need to absorb as much of knowledge and style and technique and whatnot as you can. Because whatever works, works. It doesn't matter what grade you have. There are no tests like can you survive 1 opponent, 5 opponents, 10 opponents. I mean, if you die, you die. That's simple. That's self-defense. There's nothing to do with grades or tests as such. You are bound to learn about what you do with if somebody attacks you with a baseball bat or knife or some improvised weapon like I don't know, stool or screwdriver. I mean, possibilities. What do you do if you're in another elevator and you get attacked? What if you're attacked by 2 persons? What if you're in a living room having a party with cocktails and your drunken girlfriends and some people start a fight with you? Different scenarios, different reality, and so forth. And that's what I've been doing lately, even though now past few months we have had a kind of a non-existent training. First, we didn't have too many people attending the class, so we had a kind of a pause when we meant to start again with this early 2020 after a few months break, and then came Corona. So not been training that. So mostly just powerlifting nowadays. But I mean, guess more or less soon about 20 years so far, different kind of martial arts stuff, varying from sports to self-defense. And yeah, I had that grappling, submission grappling, along with Defendo, which was kind of going back to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but without G's, you know, the judo suits or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu suits. So that's the background. So yeah, I'm not the best out there, obviously. I really couldn't be, but I mean, I have a various background, and I think I can pretty much, you know, defend myself most of the time. Anyway, that's 11 questions. I guess a way too lengthy video once again, but thank you for asking these questions. I'm happy to answer you all the time. And if you are more inclined to any of these details, just ask me and I will get back to you. Also, I have some bunch of already questions you made. I'm gonna add them to the list and get back to you with them with another video. And obviously, like I said, if you have more questions based on this one or just some random questions, don't be afraid. Put them on the comments box below and I will add them to the list and get back to you soon as well. Thank you for watching. I hope you will be enjoying Rauta and staying healthy despite of all this Corona stuff and all shit. Have a good Easter. Enjoy your blasphemous Easter with good food, beer, you know, chocolate eggs, or whatever you do. Thank you and bye-bye.